How does the estate planning work when you have a professional corporation? Hi, this is Jeff Mersace, the Plain English Attorney, and I've got a really interesting topic today that's going to include professionals and trusts and their business and livelihood. How does the estate planning work when you have a professional corporation? All right, let's start out with just a quick explanation of what professional corporations are. Professional corporations are regulated professions, but yet they're still allowed to be inside some sort of corporate structure or an LLC. Sometimes you will see a law firm name, PC or PLLC, that stands for Professional Corporation or Professional Limited Liability Company. So it is still a corporate structure they're working with, but that P becomes very significant. There's also PA, Professional Association, and the way they are run and the way they have certain types of limited liability when they're being run in business, well, that's all according to that corporate structure. But the challenge that we sometimes have when we're doing estate planning and we set up a revocable living trust, you can just take limited liability company interests and move them into the revocable trust, or if it's a corporation or even an S corporation, generally you could just move them into the trust and it's funded and it avoids probate and it's no big deal. But you do end up with some stumbling blocks on some of these professional corporations because they are highly regulated, like doctors, lawyers, architects, even geologists, certain highly educated professions that have high standards and a board that oversees them, not just for the standards, but also for ethics. This is where people who aren't licensed in part of the profession usually can't own any part of that business. Now, I'm going to be talking mainly about North Carolina and things that I've seen over the years. The principles probably reach out nationwide, but definitely check with your state or jurisdiction if you've got more questions on this. So let's take something like doctors. If it's a medical practice, in North Carolina, you can't have non-licensed physicians owning part of that practice. It's the same thing with attorneys. You can't have a non-lawyer own part of a law firm. Now, this is something that I know from years ago, there was up to a certain percentage could be owned by non-lawyers if it was part of an employee benefit plan. But even so, as part of that benefit plan, they did not have control over that business. So, for example, with my practice, I can't take my law practice and simply move it into my revocable living trust as a way to avoid probate. I can't. It's regulated that way, and that's just the way it is. I remember many years ago, a firm of geologists that did like environmental statements and testing soil and all this other stuff. They were used in construction and other projects, so it was very important that it be done right. And if I'm remembering correctly, at least 51% of the interests in a business had to be owned by a geologist, but they allowed the other 49% to be non-licensed geologists. So it can't go into the revocable living trust. So how exactly does this work? Every regulated profession has its own rules about the sale of those professional practices and the fact that it does have to go to someone who's licensed. Because of that, it's probably not a huge deal about those interests being in probate, because the rules of the profession are going to kind of override the usual rules of probate. So if it's sold, then the money has to go according to the will, which would mean, all right, the money ends up going into probate. You don't have to really have the probate court sign off on the sale because it's governed by that profession's governing board. Well, wait a minute. How do we keep this stuff from having to go through probate? I mean, when we're talking about using revocable living trusts, the main idea for estate planning is avoid probate. Well, this is where it's a little bit more of a business planning thing ahead of time, where you find the prospective buyer and you sit down with them and there's a buy-sell agreement. So the buy-sell agreement with someone else who's also part of that regulated profession, if you pass on, they're signing a contract that they are obligated to purchase your practice, and it can lay out terms for pricing. So whoever dies first, the other's going to buy that practice, and they have a contractual obligation to do that. Well, what if the other person died first? Well, then vice versa. So that's the standard buy-sell agreement. Now, one of the things that always ends up being a bit of a discussion is, where are they going to come up with the actual cash to do this? And this is usually where they'll buy life insurance on each other so that the money is there to buy it from the estate. So if there's this contractual agreement to buy and sell, it can also state here's where the money goes, which could be over to the revocable living trust. So the contract is a pre-existing obligation. That sale happens, and it happens to someone who's licensed in part of the regulated profession. And it goes to that licensed person, but the trust ends up getting the money. So that's how we can get around it. In terms of probate, I think I'm going out on a limb a little bit here. Please don't quote me on this. Because there's the other board that governs the practice in that profession, it doesn't have some of the usual big pitfalls that you end up having to go through the probate court, because the process is with the profession and it's just the money that ends up going in there. So I hope you found that information useful. As always, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to keep getting more of this information. It really helps the algorithms, and it helps us keep this content coming out. And as I always tell my clients, please stay safe, plan ahead, and enjoy life. And whatever you do, make it a great day.